It's Wednesday, the 21st of December, 2022, and we're looking at the Montreal skyline viewed from Île Sainte Hélène, Parc Drapeau. Directly behind me is Alexander Calder's Man 3-disc sculpture. And being the winter solstice, the sun sets basically just to the left of or just behind the skyscrapers that are slightly left of center there. But as we can see, we got quite a bit of cloud. I saw the cloud coming in, as I headed this direction, knowing that it could basically make it impossible to see the sunset. But I'm hoping there might be a little gap in the clouds and below, low on the horizon. And even if it's not possible to see the sun setting, hopefully it'll light up the clouds, after sunset. So again, just hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, which basically means I won't get anything terribly interesting in terms of photos. I mean, this is okay, shall we say, but it's hardly a spectacular sunset. But a spectacular sunset could materialize if there's a gap, under the clouds, low on the horizon, allowing the setting sun to light up the underside of the clouds. As far as exposure and everything goes, what I'm seeing on the screen is very, very close to what I'm seeing with the unaided eye. Not a huge difference anywhere, really. The buildings are slightly darker than what I'm seeing with the eye. There's a bit more detail in terms of I wouldn't even say detail, there's the same amount of detail. It's just that the buildings are a bit darker on the video. And the sky, maybe just a tiny bit lighter than what I'm seeing, particularly in the brighter areas. I could stop now to sort of make things closer to what I'm seeing in terms of the clouds, a third to a half a stop. But I think we're just going to leave well enough alone. We're shooting at a 40th of a second at 7.1 ISO 125. The ISO went up, actually. I had lowered the shutter speed to bring the ISO down to 64, which is the base ISO of the camera, giving the highest amount of dynamic range. But there's probably not a huge difference between ISO 64 and ISO 125 in terms of dynamic range. Possibly, though, there could be half a stop to even as much as a stop difference in the dynamic range. It tends to go down steadily as one raises the ISO. So anyway, there's some sort of orangey, sort of peachy, creamy color in the clouds, in the brighter areas, which isn't really showing. Maybe I should decrease the exposure. Thankfully, I can do that just by tweaking the exposure compensation here. So I just went down a third of a stop, and now I'll go down 2/3. Okay, that's closer in terms of the clouds. In terms of the clouds and the brighter areas, this is closer to what I'm seeing, at least what I'm seeing on the screen here. So I'm just going to check the time here. We're basically just killing time, as it were. 3:58, just turned to 3:58. The official sunset, I believe, is 4:10 or 4:12 or something like that. So we're about 10 to at most 15 minutes away from official sunset. We can see the clouds. There's a little bit of color underneath some of them now. So it may be that the sun is poking through here and there. We can see the brighter areas. are gaining a bit of, they're a bit more orange. They're still sort of peach cream color, but a bit more orange red than they were not that long ago. So I don't see the point of taking a still photo at this point. I'm sort of waiting for the good still photos to show up. So we'll just keep the camera running anyway. It's kind of a nice scene. I might even just shut up so you can hear the river. And there's some background Christmas music. There's a skating rink off to my right behind me. Quite a nice looking skating rink. Like, it's sort of like a trail type skating rink. It's not like an open rectangle. It's sort of like a trail through a wooded area of Île Sainte Hélène. Parc, Drapeau looks quite nice. Might even go get some skates and try it out. Not right now, but I see a couple of people showing up here. So anyway, I've scouted this area in the past in terms of a winter solstice sunset alignment. And as I said, the sun does come down right around the extremity of the skyscrapers there. If I move more to my left, i.e. further south, I'd have a better chance of seeing the sun when the sky is clear. I mean, that's not going to happen tonight. It's pretty obvious. But in terms of an actual alignment where you can see the sun, let's say between the skyscrapers and that tower there. You can see that little tower just off to the left of the skyscrapers. That's a tower in the old port, former silo, or maybe not a silo. It was for loading ships. It sort of had an elevator. It's for loading ships, I think with grain. Anyway, so it would be possible to maybe get the sun in that little gap between. I mean, it's definitely possible. It's just a question of finding the right spot. But of course, if I move further left, further south, the gap gets smaller. So at some point, it might be too small. Anyway, it's something to keep in mind for future reference. I see that the sky is getting a bit more interesting. Seeing a bit more orange cream under the clouds. I'm debating if I should raise the camera a bit or maybe use a wider angle. I'm not sure what angle I'm at right now in terms of how many millimeters. It's a 28 to 70 millimeter lens. I maybe didn't mention that. I'm pretty close to 28 millimeters if I'm not actually at it. I do have a 20 millimeter lens handy, which I could put on for a wider angle, but I'm not really that keen on going wider than 28 millimeters, to be honest. So I'm seeing, color under the clouds, even sort of higher up. I could tilt the camera up a bit to see more above. So we may get something yet. I see behind the buildings, behind the skyscrapers, there's a clearing, some color on the clouds. I might even zoom in a bit too. This is an old autofocus lens, and the aperture kind of jumps around a bit when you zoom the lens. So you get these funny changes in exposure while you're zooming, which is unfortunate. Anyhow, yeah, so we've zoomed in now. That's not bad. It's really not bad. So I think I'm actually going to keep this angle. I think I'll move slightly to the right to get the big wheel in. So we're going to keep this particular angle. And we'll see what happens. Actually, it's funny because at the moment, in terms of the clouds immediately above the city, there's not much color. There is some color much higher up, about a handspan or more above the horizon. There's some color in the clouds. And I'm noticing it's getting brighter there just to the left of the skyscraper. That's pretty well, the sun's there somewhere. It might actually be behind the buildings, or it might be hidden behind the clouds. It's hard to tell. So just debating if it's worth. I don't think I'm going to move tonight. I think I'm going to stick where I am, but I do intend to come back in following nights if skies are clear, because I do want to see what the actual alignment is in terms of getting the sun right at the edge of the city where I have to be exactly, and I do think I have to be further south, closer towards the Concord Bridge. But on top of that, there's Venus and Mercury quite close together, off to the left of the sun, south of the sun, over the next few nights. On Christmas Eve, I may not be on the island. I may be off island and not able to do it. But on Christmas Eve, after sunset, it is possible to see a triangle formed by Venus, Mercury above and to the left, and then the crescent moon more or less at the same level as Venus off to the left. So you've got the base of the triangle formed by the waxing new moon, crescent moon, and then Mercury above and between them. So that would be an interesting image to capture. So it's looking promising. I'm seeing this big gap now over the buildings. We can see this quite large gap under the clouds. So I think there's a reasonable opportunity to get a nice, colorful sunset. And as I said, if I look straight up, oh, that's interesting. I just saw a vapor trail, a jet sort of going into the clouds. Yeah, it's quite nice. Jet vapor trail between gaps in the clouds. So yeah, the sky immediately in front of me is not all that lit up yet, but there's still plenty of time for that to happen. As I said, the sunset doesn't actually occur until a few minutes from now, 4:06. I think officially it's supposed to be 4:10 or 11 or something like that. Certainly no later than 4:15 at the latest, the official sunset. And sometimes it takes a while, even, you have to wait for the sun to go down below the horizon a bit before it lights up the clouds. So we've got 7 minutes of recording time left, which will bring us to the official sunset time, as it were. And then we may do another clip, or I may switch to still photos. I may switch to still photos if the sky lights up in the coming minutes before the end of the video. I see someone down at the edge of the water, perhaps another photographer. I don't see a tripod, but it could be a photographer waiting for what I'm waiting for, which is a nice sunset here. And I'm just debating if I should adjust the exposure. I think we're going to leave it as is. The sky is very, very close to what I'm seeing. The buildings are a little bit darker, but really not that much. So we're going to keep the exposure as is. One more time, I'm using an aperture of f7.1 for sort of optimum edge-to-edge optical quality. The shutter speed I set to a 40th, and the ISO is automatic, and it's right now at 140, so it's gone up a little bit, because as it gets darker, and you're not changing the shutter speed and the f-stop, well, then that necessarily means that the ISO has to go higher as it gets darker to compensate. So that's that. We're hoping for a nice sunset. It's quite possible it won't get more interesting than this. I am seeing a bit of a glint there at the edge of the skyscrapers. There's definitely a glint. But I think actually the sun sets behind the buildings. I really do have to move further south to my left by at least some hundreds of feet to be able to see the disk of the sun, which I'm not going to see anyway because of the clouds. But for future reference, I may want to be more, somewhere between the Concord Bridge and Alexander Calder's Man 3 discs. The only problem with that is that for a clear view, it's problematic because there's a lot of trees along the river's edge. So I could get right down to the river's edge to avoid too many trees in the way, like even get past them. But that can be problematic. You wouldn't want to accidentally fall into the river, especially this time of year when it's very, very cold. In terms of winter solstice sunset alignments, this isn't the best by any means, but it isn't too bad, and it's certainly possible to get to a position not far from here, a little further south, a little further to the left, where you would see the sun setting, directly to the left of the clump of skyscrapers there, the western extremity of downtown Montreal. So anyhow, just have to wait and see what happens in terms of color in the sky, but it's not looking super promising right now. We've actually lost color everywhere pretty well. There's no color in the clouds above me. There's very little color in the clouds in front of me, so it's just gray. Just a little tinge of pink here and there off to the left there. If I zoom out a bit, we can see a bit of pink. So maybe that's what I'll do, because we're not going to get the... okay, so there goes that aperture. So there's a little bit of pink in the clouds off to the right there, but not much. 2 minutes and 35 seconds recording time left. We're just going to let it roll. I'm not going to say much for the next little while because I have to tie a loose shoelace, but I'll be back. Minute and 1 second of recording time left. So we're just going to let it roll. But again, it's not looking very promising at the moment in terms of getting a nice, colorful sunset. Seems to have fizzled. And we did not really see the sun. I do believe that it actually sets somewhat behind the building, so they block the view of the sunset. So I really do have to move at least, I'd say, a few hundred feet further left, and maybe even as far as the Concord Bridge. So keeping that in mind for future reference. 14 seconds, 13 seconds, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7,